Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the CoTrackPro podcast. This is Doug DeVitri here with a very special guest. His name is Ken Rosa. He has been representing himself in court, has had a lot of success. He's been through, the ups and downs of it. So I want to, with no further ado, I want to introduce you to my friend Ken Rosa.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, Ken, take us back to the beginning, right? So, um, what you made yourself decide to represent yourself in the custody and civil court cases?
Necessity. So, going back to, I got stuck into, obviously, she filed for the divorce. And, we burned through $250,000 arguing and litigating with lawyers and used all of the big name firms. I won't name names, but they're atrocious. And basically, they're just there to suck up all the assets and money. And then once that's done, then they have no more use for you. So, then my co-parent, she didn't want to share the kids afterwards, and so I would have to go file things, and I think there was like 42 interference with custodies and stuff, and so I just ran out of money and couldn't afford to have lawyers do that anymore. So what are you going to do? Let it go? Or are you going to learn how to play the system? And so that's how I learned how to file motions and
Yeah.
tweak those type of things and become my own representation. And nobody knows my case like I do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just men too. It's women who are having the same experience here, especially in St. Louis County. Um, I can imagine, right? How many times that you've had to come to court, right, prepared, and then you're kind of sitting back, and trying to present yourself or waiting to present yourself. That can be intimidating, right?
Well, it's also intimidating in the fact that when you come to court as a pro se litigant, these courts hate that, man, because you're not using their buddies, and there's not money being exchanged like there was back when the lawyers were doing everything right. We got to have 19 continuances, and so when you're being pro se, that the billable hours and chaos goes down a lot. So they absolutely hate pro se litigants, and some of that hate is self-garnered. Some people don't take the time to learn how to structure these motions, and they just bring in paperwork and it says, these are my rights and you must enforce them. And it's just, some people can't even read, write, and spell. So I get the frustration, but at the same time we also have a constitutional right to represent and to have our grievances addressed in these courts. But it can be very intimidating for sure.
Yeah, and I would imagine that you kind of have to do what they say, or at least it would seem that way, especially when they're putting paperwork right in front of you and saying that you have to sign this. I can imagine it's really easy to kind of fall into that trap.
Yeah, so when I use the lawyers, right, that's how they pumped me out the first time when I went to court, and they said, we're getting divorced today and you must sign this. I never would have put my signature to that garbage that they made me sign that day. So being pro se gives you time to actually study the case laws and the cases, and it's you have to be very tactful in it as well, because basically you're telling a judge that I don't agree with you. You're not following the law, and we know that you're quote unquote God in this courtroom, but you're still wrong. So here's why. And so that has to be done very tactfully. You can't just walk in there and tell them, they're full of crap, or, in lack of better terms, you're just full of shit, and then carry on, because once you upset the judge, nothing's going to ever go in your favor. So you have to be very tactful in these filings too, right? You can't take this personal. Lawyers don't take it personal when they're filing all this stuff. It's just emotion, so it has to be set up and put that way. And I get it; it's our kids and it's our lives and all that stuff. But you have to be very tactful, and you have to be very, very proper in the way you structure and litigate these things.
Well, yeah, I can understand that, and especially because it can be such an emotional situation, you can fall into a trap really easily, right?
Yeah, and if you're putting things in there that you shouldn't, or you're name calling, or you're being just an antagonistic, the next thing you know, you'll get smacked with a what they call a vexatious litigant, to where they won't even let you file things into the case without, so like I said, they've got to be structured well, and a judge can look at those things and they know whether you're full of crap or not. to say like, oh, okay, this dude knows what he's talking about. This dude goes and studies case laws. Wow, if I don't rule in a certain way, this is going to get blown into complaints with the state bar and the OCDC and those type of things. And so, we actually might have to play by the rules with this one.
Well, sure, and it's I always question, and it do the attorneys play by the rules in some of these cases, especially when they know them, or do they have to
Yeah.
play by the rules, and who's going
So
to hold them accountable?
so through Freedom of Information Act requests and stuff, we did a bunch of that type of thing. And it's these judges like to get the GALs that they like and it make their case work easier and stuff. And I get that, but at the same time, it's like they get these little cliques set together, and that judge always assigns this certain set of GALs instead of picking another one. And some of that's familiarity, but some of that is also the fact that oh, it's my turn to win, so this lawyer's going to win, and this lawyer's going to win. And so when you litigate these things out, you see that it's not as much about constitutional rights, and it's not about a lot of things. So that's why I say the filing's got to be very proper and structured, in the fact that the judge has to look at that and go, oh wow, this dude actually knows what he's doing. This good dude's going to be a pain in the butt from here on out. And so therefore we're just going to play this one by rule, because the next 10 people that come in after him, they're not going to be as prepared and they're not going to be as ready. So therefore we'll just let this dude slide on through, because it's less of a headache.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where'd you learn to file some of these pleadings or motions?
Get my ass kicked. So I turned in the first couple of them, and I was like, man, that's hot garbage. And then it's like, well, how do the lawyers do it? So I took some motions and stuff that had been filed in all of my divorce cases, and learned to structure them and put them together. And then I learned to go to different places like Justia Law, and find the case laws and things. And there's a lot of good case law out there that supports parental rights. Granville versus Troxel from the United States Supreme Court, Stanley versus Illinois. And basically it says, if you've never been found unfit, they can't take your parental rights from you.
Yeah, no, I just in kind of hearing some of the things that you've done in the past, and we met through one of the shared parenting groups here in St. Louis. I was really impressed by not just what you've learned through the process, but also with whom you share it to, right? To be able to help people who might be in a similar situation.
Yeah, so you can't practice legal, you can't be a lawyer for people, but at the same time, if someone, you can be a coach on these things. So if someone says, hey man, I can't afford this, I want to do this, and they send you a filing that they're going to go file, and you say, well, if it were me, I would tweak this and I would tweak that and I would say this and I would do that. I mean, I'm not your lawyer, but at
Yeah.
the same time, basically I'm just being your English teacher and showing you how to structure and say things properly in the motions that you already put together and did. And then once people get the hang of that, they take off and run with that themselves. And then they'll send you stuff to look at, and you're like, well, man, I wouldn't even change anything in that if it was my filing. So more power to you. And so once you empower people to understand that they actually can do this on their own, because it's like you said, it's personal. You're in there, you're getting your ass kicked in these courts. It seems like nothing's going your way. And on top of all that, you have to structure an English paper in legal terminology.
Right.
And it's like it's too much. So most people can't, but once you settle down and you realize it's just a business, everything's got to be filed properly. And once you know how to do that, it goes a lot of favor towards the way the pro se litigant wants.
Well, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that a pro se litigant can make in either filing specific motions or just approaching the court in general? That
Don't
maybe
be
you've
in
made or you made or somebody else that you've seen has made.
Yeah, so it goes back to the structure, man. Don't be antagonistic. Don't go in there and tell the judge they're a lying piece of crap, because automatically you've already blew it up. Now the judge is like, oh, okay, you want a piece of me? Like, I got something for you, bro. And so it doesn't matter what you do or say. Now the judge has got it out for you. So that goes back to, you got to take out the emotional side of this, and it's very, very hard for people because, like you said, your life's getting blown up at the time, and if you're too emotional in this, you can't see the end picture. You got to be able to see the end picture of what you're trying to get, what you're trying to do. And so therefore, separating the politic and the business side of this from the emotions while you're in it is probably the number one hardest thing for people.
Yeah, so I mean, how would you say this process has affected you emotionally, and also maybe your kids who are watching you or your co-parent go through this?
Yeah, so she was always on the offense. I was always on defense. That's a lot of the way I learned how to do this. Is that anytime they file something, you have to file a response. So we did defense for the first 7 years, and then due to the age of my kids and what was going on and stuff, a lot of people don't know in Missouri. So, and people can be upset about this or not. It really doesn't matter. I hadn't seen my kids in years, and the prosecuting attorney wouldn't do things. They wouldn't file and prosecute the interference with custody. There is a law that states that it becomes a felony once they withhold the children from you so many times. They wouldn't prosecute that because she's the mom and they don't want to be looking like that. But at the same time, they were prosecuting. So I was like, well, she don't have to abide by the divorce decree. I don't either. So I ain't gonna pay that stupid child support. And then they felony prosecuted me with that, and I had to walk in and pay the entire balance due off in order to not be prosecuted felony. But at the same time, they won't prosecute the felony for her interfering with the custody. So that's, once again, you have to separate the business and the motions from it, right? And then we always played defense until I played offense. So I terminated my parental plan when my oldest kid got to, or my youngest child, I'm sorry, my youngest son, he got to 17. Hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and there was no plans or intentions that she was just bleeding and milking me dry. And it was a way that made her stay relevant. So I terminated my parental plan pro se. I actually call it's basically, you're suing her for what's called child support abatement. And it goes back to the last time I was able to see my son. You have to pay me back for all of that money, since I'm at the court saying like she won't let me see it. And there's a law on the books that says that, mom can be held accountable for that, or I guess dad, if that's the way it's going to. So basically what we did is we used the fact that I'd paid her $42,000 in child support since the last time I'd seen my kid. And she was going to have to cut us a check for that, or terminate the parental plan, all future payments. We're done with this. We're all walking away. And that was it. So that's how I terminated my parental plan. And then once my son turned 18, him and I have kind of rebuilt that relationship. We talk almost every single day. Um, and so that relationship was able to be restarted. But at the same time, the state of Missouri should have helped out a dad, not just on the monetary side, but they should have helped out the parental relationship as well. So from that, I learned to sue my GAL and the therapist, and we took that all the way to the Missouri appellate courts. And there were some legal wranglings that were going on there, and we're not done with that yet. But yeah, basically, I just blew up the whole system and sued everybody, and it's very hard to do. But that's kind of how it all came into play.
It takes a lot of courage, right, to do that, especially because this isn't your job, right? This isn't your business. You have a whole other business and life that you're trying to manage, right? And now you take this on, and it's extremely formidable.
Yeah, so I like to joke around and say I'm just some dumb redneck dad from Missouri that wanted to cut grass and build houses for a living. You guys made me get this crash course in law degree ass whooping, so here we are. Um, it is very challenging, and you do have to have a lot of courage. So when I sued the Missouri Division of Family Services, they are a state entity, so the Missouri Attorney General. They sicked a bunch of their lawyers on me, so you're getting slammed with all of these filings from like legit best of the best attorney general's lawyers, and they're coming after you to with pitches and with pitchforks and fire trying to burn you down. So yeah, it can be very intimidating.
Oh my God. Let's, oh man. Um, let's go back to what you're talking about before with getting back and having a relationship with your son, right? And they call that reunification, or maybe you had some reunification therapy. Tell me about kind of that process where you were on the hinge of it, you learned about it, and then were able to reconnect in that relationship.
So yeah, so that was a bunch of stuff. We filed for reunification therapy, which is ass backwards, right? Because I wouldn't have to be reunified with my child if the mom had just let me see him. And we went to, I think, one or two sessions. We were in the second session, and the kid, he was a teenager at the time. I think he's about 14 or so, and he stood up and he said, "I don't have to listen to this bullshit." He looked at the therapist and said, "This is the last time I'll be here. See you." Walk out the front door. And I was like, so now what do you do? And she's like, I don't know. So then we went back to the courts and we asked the courts, like, hey, what's next? And they're like, we don't know. So, they punted and kicked the can down the road, and that's what ended up ultimately. It was a few years that I didn't see him after that we terminated that parenting plan at 17. And the thing is in the state of Missouri, once a minor reaches 17, they can live wherever they want. Doesn't matter what court orders are going on or whatever. So they can go live with Bob down the street if they want to, and you can't stop them because
Mhm.
they're considered a legal adult, even though they can't sign for any kind of contracts, leases, apartments, anything like that until they turn 18. They're still considered legal to live where they want at 17. So the court ordered, it's just more chaos and more things and co-parents souping them up and telling them, your dad's the bad guy and all this stuff, or vice versa, whatever they were telling them, it doesn't matter. So the court ordered reunification didn't work, but they want that relationship. So once he turned 18, we started reaching back out to each other, and it went pretty slow at first. And you know, they long for that relationship. So once he turned 18, I never talked about none of that bull crap that was going on. I didn't talk about who was getting sued. I didn't talk about anything about his mother or his sister. I haven't talked to his older sister since 2021. And that's very hurtful. But at the same time, I'm glad that that relationship is rebuilding. And maybe someday she'll reach out and we can rebuild that relationship as well there. But if not, you know, at least he did. And like I said, we talk every day. It's probably, I think we're somewhere around 450 days that we talked, consecutively in a row. And we have lunch and dinner and stuff, once or twice a month. And so we rebuilt that relationship because there's no chaos and interference or billable hours for any court appointed people to put in there. And so once you take the animosity and everything out of it, it's amazing what two people can rekindle.
Yeah, and there has been a little bit of judicial reform in recent years, but clearly not enough. What would you recommend if we were going to reform the system to make it either easier for pro se parents or be able to shine a light on some of the darkness that kind of goes in the background?
So there's so many angles that it comes at, right? We were able to pass 5 states are now up to, you have to start at the position of 50-50. If you're going to get divorced, the kids are going to go spend 50% of the time with dads, 50% of the time with the moms. That's it, period. We don't want to hear nothing else. And if you're going to bring us a case, it better have some damn good evidence of why, you know, the kid can't go spend time with the other parent. So that was a good reform. And that seems like it's such common sense, but I'm not trying to be political in any type of way. There's a lot of hard feelings towards the president of the United States, and there's a lot of people that, would support him to the end of the earth. But we see how the judiciary is so far out of control that the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, has told these circuit level judges, listen, man, the executive branch is separate from us. You don't get to tell them what to do. Stop issuing these stupid injunctions and leave that man alone. Those are the top line of the judicial branch, and yet we still have these judges that want to inflict they just can't help themselves. So when somebody brings a lawsuit in there, instead of saying, hey man, we've been handcuffed, the SCOTUS told us not to deal with this, they're still inflicting their opinions, they're still doing all this stuff, even though they know it's going to get overturned at a higher level and that they're just going to get sued for it. So the biggest thing we need is judicial reform. We need to look at the immunity of these things. A lot of people don't know that judges have what's called absolute immunity, and basically, if they were acting in a judicial capacity, you can't sue them. That comes from a 1960s case called Stump versus Gardner, and the little girl had ADHD or whatever she had, from the 1960s, obviously be diagnosed. She was a problem child. So her mother took her to this judge and said, "Hey, man, I can't control this kid. She's out of control. Do something." And this judge literally had a human being female sterilized as a minor.
Oh my God.
Now, once the little girl turned 18, she moved on. She ended up getting married, and then she wants to go back and have kids. And so she goes and they say, "Well, you can't have kids." And she said, "Well, why can't I have kids?" And they said, "Because you're sterile." And she said, "Well, how the hell did I get sterile?" And so they go back to this judicial order. She sued this jerk all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And they said because he was acting in a judicial capacity, he can't be sued for sterilizing a human being.
Wow.
That's absolute immunity. That can't be. You have to be held accountable for if your judge is biased or if your judge is not following the laws. We just seen a case. It was Rocket versus Enemy out of Missouri. It was in Taney County, and it was the first time a sitting judge was sued all the way to SCOTUS as a sitting judge, and the judge lost because his actions were so egregious that the courts were just like, "Yo, man, like we just can't." So this guy, as a sitting judge, he's still a practicing judge. He's still signing off on judicial orders. Just lost the case, saying that basically you infringed upon two children's rights so badly that we can't even justify what you did because you weren't acting in a judicial capacity, and so therefore, you have liability to answer for. So the immunity needs to be looked at. The guardian ad litems have what's called quasi judicial immunity. That has to be looked at. If you're going to be a state worker, um, you should be there are guidelines that are in place, and if you're not abiding by those guidelines, you should be able to be sued. You shouldn't have a blanket immunity saying, "Well, you work for the state, so therefore you can't be held liable for your actions." Because if I was going to a therapist or another lawyer and you egregiously tanked my case, then I would be able to sue you. But I can't because you work for the state, and then you're the person that is court appointed to be my guardian ad litem or my therapist. Like, I didn't choose you. I didn't say, "Hey, let me go hand you a pocket full of money and you be my therapist." I got ordered to participate with your stupid services. And then, if I go in there to a therapist and they give me the wrong type of things and I harm myself, I can sue you for medical negligence. But because you work for the state, I can't because you have quasi judicial immunity. That makes zero sense.
You know, and just talking through a lot of these situations and scenarios, wouldn't it be just easier if we all learned how to co-parent better, right? Like mom and dad. Thinking about the kids and putting the kids first, like I think about how can we create better process, better tools to be able to support rather than making accusations, having it strung out for a number of years. So that's just kind of what's on my mind with a lot of this.
Well, and so now that we have these 50-50 laws passed, right? They have a commission in Arkansas that is tasked with keeping up with those statistics. They're doing the best out of the nation, and basically their litigation, once they pass and they have the best language in the United States. It says that there must be clear and convincing evidence that the other parent cannot be 50-50 involved, and we're talking about 50 parental time, 50 custody, 50-50 across the board. So their language is the best, and they do have a division that is keeping up with their statistics, and their litigation went down by double digits, so almost 20%.
Wow.
Their domestic violence, because now we don't have to beat on each other because we can just get along. The court said this is what's going on. We don't have to argue about it. We don't have to show up and the boyfriend shoot the dad in the parking lot of the gas station. We don't have all that stuff in Arkansas like they did. And so their domestic violence went down by double digits. The number of divorces Well, you don't have an incentive to leave the marriage now in Arkansas, so the number of divorces has went down by double digits. So taking the chaos and the animosity in between the two parents. Oh, we loved each other when we were. It was so hot and heavy. Ooh, baby, baby. But now, what they say, you want to find out the true measure of someone, try getting divorced, and then you'll see what they're really like. So, um, yeah, a lot of that has went away in Arkansas, and the reason for that is because the system was better reformed to take out the let's brawl to the wall and see who can end up with the assets, the kids, and everything else. And for the better part of 50 years, it's been the mom because of the tender years, insanity doctrine, and all that other stuff. But that's a different story for a different time. But that's just the way it's been, and so we're shifting those norms and those societal ways of doing things to where everybody's like, wow, actually, if dad's not involved, it's all societal chaos. I mean, you show me a statistic for societal degradation, and I'll show you a fatherless home.
My gosh. What um for somebody just starting out, right? They just either sign the papers or they're considering signing the papers, and I would never encourage anybody to do that, right? I mean, there's obviously ways to be able to protect and preserve your marriage, but what would you recommend to somebody first starting out and they know that they have to represent themselves? What would be your first piece of advice?
Well, let me drop back. Let me go to if you're just first starting out and you don't think you can represent yourself, and you're going and you're looking for a lawyer, and you go to a lawyer and you say, "Hey, man, I've got to get divorced, unfortunately. So will you represent me?" And they say, "Yeah, give me a boatload of money and we'll get started." And so you hand them a boatload of money. Well, before you hand them that boatload of money, ask them, "Hey, man, if my judge is doing something or my guardian ad litem or somebody is doing something that is unethical, unconstitutional, or not allowing me to be a parent under Troxel versus Granville or Stanley versus Illinois or some type of things like that, will you file a bar complaint against the guardian ad litem, or will you file a complaint with the chief justices of the Missouri courts to against the judge to help me enforce my parental rights?" And 99 times out of 100, all those lawyers are going to tell you, "I absolutely will not go against my colleagues." And if they are that type of lawyer, do not hand them the boatload of money. You will be better off to go in there pro se, not knowing anything and just let them gang beat you up, for lack of a better term. Just let them gang jump you, and you'll be better off and save money because the lawyer won't file those complaints. That's his colleagues, and they're not going to go against their buddies. Period. So if you are going to be pro se and you're going to do this, number one, got to have your terminology in place. Realize this is a business. It's nothing personal. I get it's personal to you, to your kids, but they see hundreds of these cases a day. So you've got to have your ducks in a row with the structure of your motions. And you can go to any courthouse and request somebody else's divorce, see what worked in that case. So start studying and looking at things. So, right, you got to get a crash course in this law degree, or at least be sufficiently proficient that you actually know what's going on. In between 50-50 custody does not mean you're getting 50-50 parental time. 50-50 parental time is something totally different from joint legal custody. So there's a lot of things that you've got to know if you're going to self represent. And it's not for everybody. But if you're going to use an attorney, make sure that's the first question I'd ask them. If something is going bad in this case, will you file a complaint against one of your colleagues? And if not, why not? And then if they say, I still wouldn't, well, that's not the lawyer for you.
What if they're Facebook friends with one another, including the judge?
I mean, at the same time, I get that because, like let's take our group or our little clique, right? You and I met because of shared parenting, right? And so we're Facebook friends. We're colleagues, right? We're doing a podcast together. Does that mean we have backdoor dealings behind the thing? Not necessarily, but it could mean we have businesses together. Um, so if you want to see how good of a Facebook friend they are, it's public record for you to go down and get the judge's contributions of who did it. And if your lawyer contributed to their judicial campaign, you're probably going to be in a pretty good position simply because they paid the judge to be there. If your lawyer didn't contribute to that judge's judicial election campaign, you might want to get a different lawyer.
Gosh, it's crazy how these things work, right?
I'm just stating the obvious.
Well, Ken, I appreciate you being a part of this podcast. I know that anybody who's listening to this that are stressed out, right, that are going through emotional turmoil and they don't know what to do, you've shared some really tough situations. And anybody else who is going through this process is probably facing them too. So just and sharing those things have been helpful. And then also some of the resources that you've shared will be helpful too. So I appreciate you being a part of this podcast.
No worries, man. I appreciate you having me on. I love doing these things. Um, for quite some number of years there, I became one of the biggest faces in the father's rights movement in the world. And, I took a step back a couple years back. And so now buddies like you, they can get me to join in and do some things and share some knowledge and stuff. But, if you're going through this, and number one, never give up. Never, 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 ever leave your children behind to deal with this because it sucks, man. This thing sucks, and you just got to stick it out. It does get better. I've rebuilt my life a couple times, and I'm back to me being the king of my world again, right? And so it does get better, and people should always know that. Number one, number two, we all have different talents. Some people aren't going to be able to self-represent themselves. Some people are. So get together with a group of people like myself or Doug or somebody, and hang out and learn as much as you can, and just get you a little bit of a buddy system together. And one of my best friends, he was an airline pilot, and he was doing the lawyer thing, and wasn't getting anywhere. And I finally talked to him. And I was like, "Man, you fly a freaking plane, bro, with 250 people on it. It's just like reading your instruction manual. Once you know how to do it, it's
Mhm.
it's simple." And so he's like, "You know what? You're right." So now he's self-representing himself. I think he's up to 3 court cases, 3 motions, and 3 wins. So you can do it. You just got to get a good little coach in there,
Yeah.
such as myself or somebody like him that's had success at this. There's a guy out of Florida. His pro se is his way, and they have a lot of good success. So it's just about learning how to do it, taking the business side out of it, but never, never give up on your kids, man.
Yeah, I love that. And the community is so important because at least, the very least, you can share some of the things you've got going on and not have it used against you.
Yeah. And the other thing is we all think we're all special, right? We're like, oh my God, my case is so much. And it's like, then you hear the guy next to you and you're like, holy crap, I'm glad I didn't have to go through what that poor guy went through. So, always, I'm not saying be thankful for your situation, but somebody out there's always got it worse than you. And that's another thing that I would like to throw in there and point out is sometimes picking the wrong lawyer, and they file things into your case, and those things will come back to bite you so many years later. I told you that my ex-wife, she filed for the divorce first, but then she tried to dismiss the divorce, and I was like, "Nah, we're in this. The whole boyfriend thing doesn't work out for me. We're getting divorced." Well, my lawyers didn't tell me, "No, let her drop that case. We'll refile tomorrow. You'll become the petitioner instead of the respondent." And the reason why that's important is 5 years later, when I filed for a modification in Missouri, I'm still the respondent. So to me, that creates a bias with the judge because you're taking a motion back in there for a modification, and he looks at it and he goes, "Oh, the respondent. So this dude lost the first case, and now he's just back to because he's a crybaby and wants something different." Now, that little bit of advice from my lawyers to tell you, "Hey, man, she wants to dismiss this divorce. We understand you don't want to dismiss it, but let's go ahead and dismiss it. We'll refile tomorrow. You're the petitioner." That would have helped me out 5 years later to not be the crybaby in front of the judge because the respondent is coming back to file a modification. So for sure, lawyers are a big, big deal if you're not going to be able to do it pro se.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a lot to think about. Ken, I appreciate you being a part of this podcast. I look forward to seeing you around.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. And anytime you need something, let me know, brother. People can find me on Facebook, Kenneth Rosa. Can't miss me. I usually got a backwards hat on or my two little girls, and I'd be glad to talk with anybody that's out there, man.